Good morning. I'd like to bring the Metro North meeting for January 2014 to order. We have two public speakers. First public speaker is Orrin Getz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. My name is Orrin Getz. Happy New Year. The first thing is I would want to wish Howard Permit all the best on his upcoming retirement. After 30 years, you deserve a retirement. I retired after 30 years over at Empire State Development. Sometimes Howard and I didn't agree, but I got to tell you that we're very appreciative of his efforts to improve the West of Hudson services. We got express train service on the Pascack Valley line that was only our dreams, and we have it now, and we really appreciate that. And I think Howard did a great job of getting major improvements to off-peak service here on the east side of the Hudson River. And we've gone to New Jersey Transit and said, look, this is a great example of how you should do it, and we used Metro North's example to show them how they should improve the service. And on a personal note, when I needed a telephone installed at the I Love New York information booth, I asked Howard's help. Within a few hours, the phone was ringing, and it was great. I really appreciate that help. And just one final little note on that. I'm glad to see now that when you go to the museum store, you can buy electric trains for Metro North electric trains, so you can have a setup of electric trains during the holiday season. I know the late Ed Vrooman really would have appreciated seeing that happening and enjoying Howard having electric trains during the holiday season. But on a more serious note, the real problem is the way New Jersey Transit handled its service during the recent storm. On Tuesday, January 22nd, when people had to leave New York early, they ran a regular schedule. They should have gotten together with Metro North and run a Friday schedule, which would put train 9653 in service to close a vital 2-hour gap on the Pascack Valley line, and that would have canceled train 1639, which is an express, which would have run empty later anyway. As a result, there was overcrowding. The 4 o'clock train only had 4 cars. They couldn't get more cars. People were left stranded at Secaucus. They were furious. The next train was also overcrowded, and this was really bad planning on the part of New Jersey Transit. Also, the next day, New Jersey Transit ran a a weekend schedule instead of the regular normal schedule. And on the Port Jervis line, that left huge gaps in the morning service and was also very undesirable, and also left hourly service on the Pascack Valley line with no express service. This was dead wrong on New Jersey Transit's side, and we're asking that Metro North take an active role in the future when you have storm conditions to tell New Jersey Transit what you expect from them to provide adequate service for the West of Hudson service. Metro North uses New Jersey Transit as a contract operator, and we have to hold them to the standards that you would expect to provide your customers when they really need it and when there's inclement weather. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second public speaker is Mary Bowden, concerned grandparents.
Good morning. There is so much to talk about today. First of all, coming to this meeting was incredibly different coming from the lobby to here. I don't know, you all come in differently than we have to come in, but it was a significant difference. I have so many things to talk about. Those of you who are going to make reports today, please do not read what's already in the bulletin. We can read. We're not, we went to school. For you all to repeat what's in the book is a waste of our time and takes too long, and it's time to change. If they could change downstairs. I want to know what your opinion is about the division that you're in. Well, we had this new this year, or this happened. I don't want statistics. Because I'm going to stand up there in silent protest if you read statistics that are already in the book. Because I looked at the book last night. Yours was on there for the most part. Bridge and Tunnel was not on there. I prepared for today. I expect every one of the board members to have prepared for today. We all read, otherwise we wouldn't be here. It's a changing society. Not just the MTA, but society. I've got 4 meetings to talk today. I don't want to use it all up here. I'll use it up at some other meetings. And then Wednesday morning, I'll be back and summarize what's going on. Howard, it's been interesting. We've had our disagreements, but I can still shake your hand.
Okay, I need approval of minutes, December 16th, 2013. All in favor? Carried. Approval of the work plan? Any motion?
Motion.
Second? Second. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Jim?
Thank you. Jim, just before we leave the public speakers, I just wanted to do 2 things. One, Howard, could you maybe clarify for the benefit of the board and the public what the coordination is between the 2 railroads now, so that we can understand, because what Orrin said seemed to make sense to me.
Sure.
And secondly, with regard to the content of reports by staff members, I think it's important to state that that this is a public body, and that we have a public service to perform, which includes making sure that the wider group of listeners and watchers who don't necessarily have either time or access to the details that the board gets also be informed of the context that goes into these reports. And therefore, I take exception to Mr. Bowden's comments about the way reports are presented here.
Okay. Howard?
Okay, let me first respond. Jim asked,
Well, Mr. President, isn't it true that if the reports weren't read, that they wouldn't be in the record?
yes, the reports are put into the, you're absolutely right, Governor.
No further questions.
First, let me just want to thank Orrin and Murray for those, Murray for your last statement is part of it, and Orrin for your kind words. And let me also just speak, Jim asked a question, so let me address that. With regard to NJ Transit during different types of events, we coordinate with New Jersey Transit. There's a regular part of our discussion in the Situation Room where we talk about West of Hudson services. And we coordinate with New Jersey Transit. We talk to them. Generally speaking, they are putting together something for the whole system, so it's not always easy to break out and say, let's do this on the Pascack Valley to Port Jervis compared to everything else that's happening west of Hudson on the NJT system. There are times when we have conversations and we're able to have changes made into what their services they're providing. But generally, so there's good communication. But I do think we have to recognize that they, those are 2 out of X number of lines, and they're looking at a whole system. Okay, let me then give, I think we're up to my report, right? Let me first start about the event that happened on January 23rd, the most unfortunate event on Thursday night. This 2-hour disruption to service during the PM peak was traced to human error during an electrical repair project. At 7:45 p.m., the computers that run the signal system began to systematically, shutting themselves down. While troubleshooting the problem and probable causes, we discovered that one of the 2 main power supply units was not properly connected. When technicians took that second one out of service for maintenance, it resulted in destabilizing the power supply to such a degree that the system shut itself down. It was shut down for more than an hour until a backup supply could be connected. At the time of the incident, there were about 50 trains at various locations on all 3 lines. So once we lost the signal system, the rail traffic controllers immediately they followed procedure, took the safest course of action. They instructed all the engineers via radio to bring their trains to the nearest station. And this was done since there was no signal systems, train by train, very slowly. to ensure it's done safely. Trains were not allowed to proceed through switches until the signal maintainers could respond and manually ensure the switches were correctly lined up, because the rail traffic controllers no longer had that information. All the trains had light, heat, and power during disruption, and no customers were ever in danger. Customers were able to get off the trains when they reached the station. We opened the doors, and we said, if you'd like to get off, you can. Repairs were made, I said, by about 9 p.m. The computers took time to reboot, but the trains started moving first on the lower level at 9:30, and then by 10:30 we had complete control again over the entire signal system. Customers were delayed significantly throughout the evening hours. It's very clear the project should never have been done this way. It should have been analyzed for risks and redundancy before it began. It should have been done in the middle of the night or over a weekend, not when thousands of customers were trying to get home. While this specific incident has been addressed and an internal review is underway being done by our Safety and Security Department, we're also going to be bringing in an independent consultant to examine how and why the mistakes were made, how we identify risks to the operation, and then to recommend any necessary changes to operating procedures and practices. Effective immediately, prior to any other projects of a similar nature being undertaken, a complete risk analysis and appropriate contingency plan will be developed. Metro-North customers, and let me just say this, I feel it's very strongly, Metro-North customers deserve better. I and the entire Metro-North team sincerely regret the incident and apologize for the inconvenience our customers experienced. Before I go through the rest of my report, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chuck?
First, let me say that I would like to join those who have congratulated Howard Permit for a job well done. He has taken a tired, sleepy, non-robust service and turned it into a first-class commuter service. And to him and to his colleagues, great credit must be given. I'd like to talk about the event of last week. Correct me if I'm wrong, the work was done by contractors, not by employees of Metro-North, is that correct?
No, Chuck. The actual work Thursday night was being done by Metro-North employees who were working on one of the two units. I believe the original installation of these two units, which were about 20 years ago, were done by a third party. Is that correct, Dan? Yes.
The reason I focused on that, and thank you for the correction, is that on the day before Martin Luther King's birthday, crews were working at Harold Interlocking constructing a new signal housing for the East Side Access Project and clipped some signal wires at that point. Those were outside contractors, and they caused a mid-morning suspension of service until the mess could be straightened out. In early September, crews digging trenches near the F Interlocking in Queens knocked out the power to the signals in 2 of the 4 East Side River tunnels. And it goes on and on with these outside contractors doing the work. And my point in all of this, and I am quoting from a superb blog put out by a group called Long Island Railroad Today, which is informative and accurate, my point is, would you or your successor or the independent people please look promptly at the possibility of eliminating outside contractors and doing the work in-house. People who work in-house have an understanding of what wires are all about. They don't disconnect without watching, and if they do, they can be held responsible. Outside contractors come and go, and I don't believe they ought to be functioning in these critical areas.
Thank you. Jim?
Howard, could you share with us the name of the consultant that is being brought in to review this?
We've not picked them yet, Jim. We are right now we are developing scopes of work for 2 different efforts. One is to identify key points of risk across the system, particularly focusing on the power and the signal system, and the other is to look at kind of the decision-making process. That's one of the things I hope to accomplish this week, is to finalize the scopes, and then we'll identify who the people will be to help us.
Could maybe a high-end summary of their findings be shared with the
Sure,
committee?
I'll pass that on to Joe.
Thank you. Howard, do you know the estimated time frame for this report, when you think it will be concluded?
Well, there'll be, we're looking at 3 different efforts. One is what Anna is putting together internally that'll give us a very good sense of exactly what happened. And what's the time frame on that?
I'd say in about 2 weeks, just to
Okay.
make sure we're complete.
Then the other 2, John, I don't know, but once we have the scopes written and developed, I'll get back to you and I'll share with the board members an estimated time frame.
Okay.
Thank you. Will the studies review, well, the part I don't understand was, this was basic maintenance, right? Not a special problem?
No, this was actually a special project. They were
I see.
replacing these old power supply units with new power supply units, and the old one was being taken out of service.
Okay, I'll save the rest of my questions for another time.
Okay.
Thank you.
John?
Forgive me, you point out that the work was done by employees of Metro North. Now, I assume that in the process of doing that work, some supervisor must have told them to do this. They just didn't do it on their own. Am I right?
We're still looking at exactly how that was put together, Chuck. That's part of what Ann is constructing right now. So we're looking at exactly what was told, what the directions were, all of that information, when they were directed to do the job. I mean, it's very basic. However, wherever the decision was made, it's basic railroading that you don't do this work during the rush hour. You do it in the middle of the night. And that's the fundamental principle. So it's inexplicable wherever it happened how that judgment was made.
But what I would like to ask, if possible, is that we receive, and the public receive, as promptly as possible, the results of this report. And it's not for purposes of fixing blame, although blame will clearly be fixed. There's a penchant of throwing people under buses around here. But the issue that I have here is, if you go back to the derailment last year at Spuyten Duyvil, not the one that killed the people, but the freight train derailment, we still don't have an NTSB report that tells us what caused it. And if it was speed, as some suspect, that would have been instructive later on. If you find that there is some endemic problem, that will be instructive. The longer you take with this, even to the extent of preliminary reports, the longer you take, the less valuable, in my view, it is.
Well, I think that's why, Chuck, we immediately, Ann and I talked, and we said, you're going to do the first report so we can get back in very short order as to what happened and what our lessons learned. These other 2 efforts will be a little bit longer because, it takes time to get on board. I don't anticipate them being that long, but again, once we put the scope together, we'll have a better sense of that.
Okay. Howard?
Okay, then let me just say the rest. The only other before, after I'm done, we're going to go to Ann Kirsch is going to give a safety report, so I'm not going to talk about that. Talking about all the actions we are taking to make Metro North safer and reduce risk. Just a couple of other points. One is on ridership. So this year, our total annual East of Hudson ridership was 81.8 million, which is the highest in our history. And when you realize that over 600,000 rides were lost during the various major events we had during the course of the year, we would have been, instead of 81.8, we would have been 82.4, so it would have even been greater. So it's actually a very positive achievement, and it reflects the years of good service of Metro North and how we've affected travel patterns, that even in a year with so many difficulties and such problems in terms of service delivery, we were able to set a record in ridership. The annual commutation was 1.9% above 2012. The non-com was 1% below, and that's really a reflection of all the shutdowns we had when non-com people could not ride. Total ridership, I will say, was not our highest ever because there's a decrease in west of Hudson, which has continued since 2008. So overall, we're still slightly below it. If we hadn't had those incidents, we would have been above it. So I think that bodes well for the future. The last thing I want to say, I just want to say a minute about my retirement. You know, I've talked about when other people have retired, and it's always very bittersweet because I don't say in my case, but in other cases, always sorry to see people go, and at the same time, wish them well. So now it applies to me, and so it is definitely bittersweet. And the good part is it's really time for me to move on, recharge my batteries, and move on to the next phase of my life. I'm very proud of the 34-year career at Metro North. I was part of the team that formed Metro North. I think I'm one of the last survivors of that group, maybe the last. And the team did some stuff, you know, I think to put it in perspective, the great achievements which no one ever thought were possible. The doubling of the ridership on Metro North, the increasing of the fare operating ratio, making it one of the highest, if not the highest in the country, the increase in service. Last year we had a customer satisfaction of 93%. That's phenomenal, considering where we started from. We built projects that no one could have envisioned, Grand Central North, Yankee Stadium. We've won many, many awards. And so I think when you look at the overall history, it's a terrific history of Metro North. I think also that at the same time, you can't look past, and I never will, the events of last year, and particularly the derailment on December 1st. It was truly awful. And these events have affected the entire organization. They've affected me. They've affected everyone in Metro North. And it's led to us basically not only doing soul searching, but really reviewing everything we're doing. And I think that that will be continued over the next years as there's a consistent review of the basic procedures and how Metro North operates. Everyone in Metro North's thoughts and condolences, prayers will always be with the victims of the derailment. One of the things that was very important to many of the employees who had nothing to do with this is that they said to me after we met in early December, please make sure the families know we care. Let them know we really care. We're really upset about it. And these are people who had nothing to do with the derailment. I do think that since over the past months, we've made progress in reducing risk. I do believe that a series of key building blocks are in place to continue these efforts. Also, a lot remains to be done. There's no question that there's significant work to be done. With Joe Giletti coming in, I know he's going to review all that's been done. He'll make changes to it. He'll see what fits in his vision, what doesn't, and then develop his own plans going forward. And I think that, you know, I look forward to that. I think that's good for the organization to have somebody else come in, give some thoughts that will be different than mine and some different perspectives. And so in closing, I just want to thank all the board members. You've always been incredibly supportive of myself and the Metro North team, particularly over the 5 years I've been president. I think you've been a big part of the success of Metro North. And I just wish the best to the board and Joe and the rest of the Metro North team as they go forward in the years. And so thank you. It's been a real pleasure and privilege to be president here.
Howard, before we get to Ann, I'd like a few things I have to say. One of the original architects of Metro North and a driving force behind its success was Howard Perman, who has been president of the railroad since July 2008. And as you just heard, is retiring at the close of this month, really the end of this week. He's only the fourth president in the history of the railroad and was part of the original team that created Metro North to have a Conrail commuter operations in New York and Connecticut in 1983. Prior to his current role as president, Howard had served as positions of increasing responsibility at Metro North, including Senior Vice President of Planning, Procurement, Business Development, Vice President of Planning, and Director of Planning. It will be easy to say that during his tenure, Metro North had numerous impressive achievements. And these include doubling the ridership to 84 million customers by 2011, making Metro-North the largest commuter railroad in the nation, attaining record achievements in service delivery, including an on-time performance consistency of over 97% and a record customer satisfaction rating of 93%. Revamping major business practices, resulting in cost savings and generating additional revenues from non-traditional sources. Commissioning the planning and construction of new and rehabilitated facilities, including maintenance shops, stations, including Yankee Stadium Station. Acquiring new rail cars, including the state-of-the-art M7s and M8s. Strengthening customer service by initiating numerous real-time communication services provided at stations on the web and via smartphone, apps, and email. Establishing Grand Central as the second largest tourist facility in New York City, and serving as a direct executive producer of the terminal's centennial celebration. Under Howard's leadership, Metro-North became the first North American railroad to win the International Brunel Jury Award for Best Design in Engineering. Prior to becoming president, Howard was responsible for developing Metro-North's capital program, developing services that grew non-traditional markets such as reverse commute, weekend travel, and discretionary trips, establishing unique pricing policies that created tiered discounts, making off-peak, peak, and reverse peak travel more attractive, creating public and private partnerships that grew parking and connecting bus and ferry services, driving interagency agreements that increased service to record levels while saving money, inaugurating regional rail service that transported Jets and Giant fans to MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. As I said, listing his achievements is easy, but what those awards and achievements don't show is that in a time of great political and economic instability, Howard successfully addressed major operational, fiscal, organizational, and governance challenges facing Metro-North. He provided leadership during a time of rapid change at the MTA and the retirement of key executive and professional staff. He dealt with significant budget reductions during the U.S. economic recession and inspired his employees to achieve more with less. He quickly overcame operational challenges created by some of the most severe weather events this region has ever experienced, including Super Sandy and Hurricane Irene. Most recently, he has guided Metro-North through an extraordinarily difficult time, and thanks to his efforts to identify their causes, the railroad is taking corrective actions to prevent similar events from happening again. Howard's dedication to and the love of Metro-North are apparent in each of his accomplishments. I am honored to say that over the last 20 years, it has been my distinct privilege working with him. His keen knowledge and understanding of Metro-North and the transportation world have been invaluable to me in successfully carrying out my duties as chairman of the Metro-North Committee and the MTA board members. Howard will be greatly missed, and I wish him well in his retirement. Now, I'd like to have the committee members come up here. We have a plaque to give Howard, and there's going to be some pictures taken, so if all of you would come up.
We need a few more. Mitch,
We go on the other side?
yeah, someone's gonna.
I'll go over there.
We don't have to get on our knees.
That's right.
Just you, John. Just you.
I can put the bat there.
Okay, in recognition of 34 years of unwavering dedication and service to Metro-North, to Howard Perman.
Just turn the plaque around. Thank you. Now we're going to go to Ann.
Yeah, now
Giving-
we're going to go to Ann for a safety report.
Thank you. As mentioned, I'll be providing an overview of the safety enhancements that we've undertaken. To start, in response to Emergency Order 29 that was issued by the FRA, the Operations Division has been working very hard to develop signal modifications for the 5 movable bridges in Connecticut, as well as the critical curves that were identified in our work plan to ensure that civil speed enforcement would be upheld. So far, Spuyten-Duyvil, Jenkins Curve and Peck Bridge in Bridgeport, and Portchester Curve have been completed. We'll have a schedule update for our next meeting. Speed compliance program. As you know, we've increased the number of audits that we've been completing, and we're developing a steady state program to ensure consistency while maintaining an increased number of audits. We'll be utilizing available technology that will allow us to more efficiently review the downloads off the trains, as well as continuing with our radar checks. Our safety stand-downs. We've agreed that we will be conducting safety stand-downs on a quarterly basis, and our next one will be scheduled for late in March. That's important, and we'll be working with our labor organizations to ensure that we're effectively communicating with our employees. Close call reporting system. Our confidential close call reporting system is a C3RS program that the FRA has been piloting across the country. We'll be implementing that program here as well, and we've been working with the FRA, the Volpe Group, and NASA to better understand the program. We briefed our labor organizations last week, and we'll be working with ACRE to start off here at Metro North. Once we have this program developed with ACRE, we'll be working with each of the other organizations to implement a program with them as well. That program requires a memorandum of understanding to be developed between all of the parties, Metro North, the labor organizations, FRA, to ensure a thorough understanding of the program and the framework of the program. We'll be continuing the installation of our alerters on the M3s and cab cars, while a modification of onboard cab ATC equipment is undertaken as well to allow for full functionality of the alerters. Our PTC implementation plan, as you know, we're working with our system integrator to identify areas which we will be able to improve upon our testing and implementation schedule, and you'll hear a detailed report on that at the CPOC meeting this afternoon. Finally, the FRA's Operation Deep Dive. We're continuing our review of our programs with the FRA, and we're working closely with them. And as we learn from this review, we'll be making any necessary modifications to our programs. We're not waiting for the report to take steps for improvement. We're continuing daily to make those improvements. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Chuck?
Two things, if I may. First, there is obviously a tension between the desire of railroaders to get the trains in as rapidly as possible, and between the desires, on the other hand, to have maximum safety. And my question to you is, since we are at long last focused heavily on safety, may I respectfully suggest that we take another good look at our schedules, because my hunch is that the more you do in the area of providing optimal safety, it will have to have some impact upon the schedule.
So, Chuck, let me respond to that. And let me say, in this case, I have to respectfully disagree that there's a conflict between reliable service and safe operations. The underpinning... Yeah, well, I think that there's always... let me say this about that. I was asked that at the NTSB hearing, and what I said at the time, which I do believe, is I said two things. I said one was that good, reliable service, the underpinning of it is safe operations. It has to be that way. Secondly, I cited the example because I really believe that that's a false choice between reliability and safety. And when Metro North started in the 1983, we had over 1,000 injuries and the trains ran 80% on time. And that exact question was raised. Well, if you want to get on-time performance up, we'll have to sacrifice safety. We have to cut corners. And that was absolutely not accepted at the time. And I think we proved that that's not that was not a real choice, because when you look at up until this past year, the trains were running 97 to 98% on time, and the injuries were around 200 to 300. So I believe the two actually go together. You raise a very important point, though, about the schedules. And you are right that in a most basic sense, Metro-North has to relook at its train schedules. And we started the process a month ago under Mike Schiffer. There he is. Mike is heading up the effort with the operating division to review the train schedules, literally starting, not in terms of frequencies. We believe with a few, the off-peak and the weekend, that the frequencies are right, the service improvements are right. There may be a few peak trains that you want to change stops or times on. But the real basic question is the running times and how we're tying the trains, how they meet each other as they integrate when they come in at Woodlawn, and then again when they come in at Mott Haven. And so he's leading that effort. The other critical input is what capital projects are completed in advance of the schedule. There's a critical project on the New Haven line that will affect the schedule, which is completion of that portion of the catenary job where 2 tracks are out of service for 8 miles. So right in the middle of the line goes from 4 to 2 tracks in Connecticut. That is scheduled to be done this spring. There are other track improvements where we've had what we call slow orders, where the trains have had to slow down. They are being fixed. They'll start to be fixed again, weather permitting, in March. So he is leading the effort with John Kessich in operations, looking at what the infrastructure will look like, as well as what the service, what the schedule should be. Because all research we've shown, including we did focus groups about 2 weeks ago, shows that customers more care about reliability than a couple of minutes of running time. They want to know if the train says it's going to get in at 8:17, it gets in at 8:17. That's more important than it gets in at 8:16 or 8:15. And so that's what he'll be doing, and that's the effort which needs to get done.
I compliment you and thank you. The second point is, since the NTSB has failed miserably to provide a report on the freight train derailment many months later as to cause, it seems to me that the only way the community that is involved, the direct Riverdale community, is finally going to have some understanding of what it believes, namely that speed on the freight train and the howling horns that Murray Bowden and others have been screaming about interminably, that we've got to do something about that. And so I would ask, please, if somewhere in Ms. Kirsch's schedule she could fit in letting us have a report on what the cause of that freight train derailment was. There are lessons to be learned. NTSB is unwilling or incapable of teaching those lessons. Somebody else has got to fill the void.
Yeah, Chuck, the NTSB reports, as you know, that process is it takes them time. You know that, obviously. It's typically about a year from the incident till they put out a report. I believe that's the case here.
And with respect, that is wholly unacceptable. Right. Safety concerns continue for a year. Right. It's wrong.
So we have to be very careful, as you know, that they are running the investigation. We talk with them. We're working with them. We know they're working on it. But it's truly their schedule. And as you know, when you're a party to the investigation like we are, we can't say anything. So for Ann to do a separate report, it really doesn't fit their process. She's working completely with them on that particular incident right now.
I must respectfully take exception. It seems to me that no competent agency should take a year to tell you, at least preliminarily, what the cause was. It didn't take them a year to tell you at Spuyten Duyvil.
Do they have an interim process?
Yeah,
where we could get
in
a
answer to speak,
preliminary report?
Ann, can you just speak to what they've said so far?
Sure. So they don't allow for immediate safety concerns to go unaddressed. They are working with us, and we are taking any corrective action that we need to take, but they have identified areas of interest. They're looking at the speed, the loading of the vehicles, the mechanical condition of the equipment, and our track conditions themselves. We're looking at all of that together with them. They've had the Volpe group come in and actually do a model of the actual train movement with the loading of the vehicles so that they can learn from that, and we're still proceeding with that. So unfortunately, we can't discuss details, but it is a process, and they are sharing with us what needs to be shared as we move
Chuck,
forward.
let me add one other thing, which I'm not sure I ever fully briefed the committee on, is that after the derailment, we reached an agreement with CSX that at their expense, they are putting on equipment, part on the Oak Point Link before the trains reach Metro North, so it's for weight, right, John? Right, so the cars can't be overweight. It will set off an alarm, and they cannot enter the territory from the south. They're also putting in equipment up north. It's north of Poughkeepsie. What is that called, John?
Yeah, actually, just outside of Selkirk, they're installing a wheel impact load detector, which both weighs the equipment and also looks for excessive impact loads to the infrastructure.
But why can't the public be told these things? I think the public has a right to know. The media have a right to unearth what it was that caused that derailment. As I will point out in Long Island Railroad meeting, the same thing is happening over there. And my point is, I want to know what happened. You've just told me months after the event that CSX has finally said they're going to do something and that NTSB has made some recommendations. Do we really have to wait months for that?
Well, then, Chuck, that's something I overlooked in the press of business, because some of these things we've known these things for some months, and the CSX agreement was made in August, I believe, right after the incident. So then that's my fault in not fully briefing the committee.
Well, just as you had a discussion before of any perceived push and pull between safety and scheduling, there's a inherent, I don't want to even call it tension, it's almost a mathematical function. When you do a study of something, your ability to bring forces to bear that will achieve thoroughness versus your immediate reaction to, my assumption is, and our standard should be, that your immediate reaction to eliminate any perceived safety flaws are different than what is the result of a thorough study. And you should never, in my opinion, sacrifice thoroughness, and that should be the standard. The longer it takes for you to do the study, the greater the level of thoroughness I would think that the board members will require of the study. If you go up to the rec immediately, people ask me questions about the rec immediately that, to me, were mechanically illiterate. That could not have happened, but I don't know until you do the research, until you look at exactly what happened. Your opinion changes. That's why you do thorough investigations. So I think as the longer it does take, it's not your responsibility to, you have to hold the NTSB accountable for a thorough investigation when it is completed. Holding a gun to their head and saying, get that report out right now, well, maybe there are things that the public should know. Maybe with open data, the way things are, maybe they make their investigations totally public. I don't know. But that's a different thing, though, than doing a thorough investigation, and that takes time.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing, though. It's very important. Ann said it, I said it before, that whenever coming after the various incidents, as soon as we know something was wrong, we do not wait. And we literally responded after the Connecticut derailment immediately, as an example, in getting rid of all the compromised rail joints. So Metro North has not waited. We've done an enormous amount of work over the past months, particularly on the right-of-way, to reduce the risk. And where we know the things to do, we will do them. We will not wait. That's been the approach throughout. I am sure that Joe would continue the similar approach.
John?
Thank you. Howard, I understand what you just said in terms of a briefing, maybe with the pressing nature of other things that it got delayed or slipped through. Could we have that briefing or in some format by the end of next week? I realize that.
On Spite and Dival?
Yeah. just following up on what Chuck and you were
Yeah,
discussing.
we can, I don't see any reason why we can't put something together that summarizes what we know so far, and what the NTSB has told us, and what we've done.
Now, just out of curiosity, is that currently in a state of required confidentiality, or is it something that can be shared with the public, or what?
The items that they've released publicly in any interim reports are public. Any information that has not been released by them is confidential.
What will we be getting? A hybrid, or the former, or the latter, or?
We'll give you everything you need to know to answer your questions.
Well,
All right,
let me,
I don't sit here and get
you can't.
email updates from the NTSB. Perhaps I
Right.
should get on some mailing list, or perhaps
No.
you should put me on one. So I don't want to have to dig.
Yeah. No,
So
John,
it
we'll
should
give
be
you.
everything public plus what you can share.
Yes, that's what
And I
we-
assume you
right.
can share everything you know with us, because if not, then we have to discuss that, I think.
Let me just be clear.
Yes.
I
The answer,
am-
John, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Let me just be clear. I would like as much detail as is available on the freight train. The NTSB and the senators made sure that everything they had on the derailments which caused death was out very, very quickly. It is this veil of silence, if you will, over the freight trains that troubles me. And I'd like to have whatever you can give me. And with respect, I believe you or NTSB have a responsibility to give it to the media. I think they have an absolute right to know.
Let me just, as someone who's been involved with NTSB for 35 years, there are federal laws on liability issues, legal issues, things that they can and can't say. That's why they do interim reports. I'm not arguing, and I agree completely with Chuck and Jonathan, that everything that they have said, once it loses its confidentiality to an MTA person, we should know.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think that's the point that they're making. Anything, obviously, they have not said to you is still confidential and will
Right.
be included, I would assume, in their final report when that report comes out. And I agree, it's normally about a year afterward. My question following up that is, have they said something, it's my understanding, let me phrase it this way, that with regard to the two derailment issues, their actions have been the same with regard to the December
Right.
issue. They have issued an interim report, which was made public, my recollection was correct, and the same on the freight derailment, they issued an interim report which was made public. Have they done anything differently between the two of them?
Did they do an interim?
I'm not aware of a single freight train derailment.
That was my
report.
question.
I believe they issued a press release initially, but I don't believe they've issued
Let
an
us do a
interim
little
report.
research.
If you could,
Well,
that would be
let
helpful.
let us look back and let us see what we have.
And let me just, for the record, make this point. I would respectfully urge Senator Schumer to take a good, hard look at that law and take whatever steps are required to amend it, to provide for public disclosure. This is an era of transparency, not an era of secrecy. The veil of secrecy over things that cause life and death cannot continue to exist, in my view.
Jim?
Thank you, Jim. Just a quick question for Ann. On the C3RS initiative, excuse me, you indicate that there's some union buy-in that needs to take place on this. And the thing that I'm confused by is that it seemed, and I don't want to necessarily put you into the weeds here, but it seemed to me that this was just a facility that was going to be available to all employees who could avail themselves of it in order to report up the chain problems that they perceived. And, I'm unclear as to why it would ever be like a work style issue.
So there's a couple of pieces to that. Yes, it is available for any employee to report an incident or concern to the third-party facilitator, NASA. And that information will come back to us in a report form with all identifying material removed from that report. The part that requires the MOU between the organizations is the part that would relieve us or them from disciplinary proceedings. So there's got to be an agreement to relieve our rules, so to speak. So if an employee wanted to report something or made a mistake that was a rule violation, the agreement would spell out whether or not we would take disciplinary action relating to that specific rule violation.
You know-
And the FRA would also agree if it was a regulatory issue.
Right. So it's a very structured process, and it may be that in the next months, you may want to get a briefing on specifically that process. But in the end, it's a memorandum of understanding signed by the FRA, the railroad, and the unions.
Okay? All right, let's get to
Okay,
procurements.
procurements, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, there's something I wanted to say, and I didn't know the appropriate time, if I could just have less than a minute. I did want to take this opportunity on this day to laud Howard for his extraordinary career and dedication to Metro North. We didn't get a chance earlier I appreciate what you said, but I wanted to weigh in as well and congratulate him on his retirement and to thank him for teaching me so much about Metro North, and even more importantly, as I think was just demonstrated, for always answering the questions, the easy ones and the tough ones, and for confronting the issues directly, and for being so helpful to me and to us at the committee. So I wanted to wish him the best of luck, and I didn't know the appropriate time. So
Thank you, John.
I think after safety, maybe now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So we have the procurements, Jim.
Yeah, we have 5 procurements on pages 17 and 18. Howard, you'd like to quickly go through them?
Yeah, we have 2 non-competitive procurements. The first one is with Zetron, which is for communication system for our emergency control center. The second one is going to be the subject with Kawasaki of the executive session. Then we have 4 competitive procurements. One is for Corey's Thunder. This is a whole new training simulation hardware for Metro North. This is a major, major step forward in how we train our engineers, using much more modern technology to be complete across the whole system, as well as all the rail fleets. The second is a one for storage costs with city storage. The third is an exercise and option to put bicycle racks on the M8s, paid for by the state of Connecticut on 50 cars. We'll test them, and then that makes the judgment if they should then be on the remainder of the fleet or the M7s. And then we have 1 ratification for the replacement of the 2 power supply systems that supply basically the regular electric power. This was the project that caused the problems last Thursday night.
Any questions on any of those procurements?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, first let me point out that I'd like to thank the chairman and CEO for picking up on the issue that several of us have raised for some time concerning the diversity activities of this agency in terms of trying to provide compliance with an edict that was issued by the former governor of the state of New York, who sits to my right, and in terms of finally doing something to provide MBWE expansion. But there are 4 procurements here that give me enormous pause. And let me just read from the operative line of the largest, which is $4,697,000. Quote, after undertaking a thorough analysis, the MTA Department of Diversity and Civil Rights determined not to assign any goals to this contract due to the unavailability of New York State certified MBWE contractors, subcontractors able to perform this work. And I think they have miserably failed in their job. And the reason is, why have they not insisted that as a condition of contracting, the contractors provide a teaching mechanism so that we can finally start to have a sufficient pool of qualified people who fit these bills, and so use the public monies that are expended for the purpose of providing opportunity. Those of us who have visited with and been suffered by the problems of discrimination in the past owe an obligation to make sure that it does not continue to happen. It seems to me we are suffering it. We are allowing it to happen. This is a miserable failure on the part of our diversity group, and I chastise them for it.
Michael, do you want to say something?
Let me say that in response to that MWDB goals are only put on procurements where there's an availability of firms in the marketplace in order to support the goal. Let me also say that we are looking at our new 5-year capital plan, looking at areas in which there are no MWDB firms, and coming up with strategies in order to create some. For example, in our track signal work, we are talking to the big 4 firms in the marketplace right now to create a mentor program which will allow us to grow some. The same thing in paratransit. We are going to look at the paratransit industry to see how we can link the smaller firms with the larger firms in order to build capacity in those areas. But this is as much frustrating to us as it is to you when we have to go through this process of waiving and reducing goals because there are a lack of firms in the marketplace. But in a proactive manner, we are looking to grow a larger pool of firms in the marketplace so we don't have to go through this exercise of waiving and reducing goals.
But you're speaking.
Do that which you can. We have an excellent new chairman of the Diversity Committee, and I'm sure that John Malloy will do a superb job in harnessing this. But I want to be very clear about it. I would like to see the day tomorrow, or as soon as possible, where every single one of these contracts, where they say they do not have people who are equipped to do it, there is built in a requirement that they will train and mentor people to do it. If necessary, make that a bidding factor. Those who do provide it get an extra credit. Those who do not provide it do not get it. And therefore, maybe those who provide it will win an award that those who do not do it. I want you to know that there are, especially the gentleman to my right, the former distinguished governor of New York, believe very strongly that this is something that is the time to do it, that you're the guy to do it, that John Malloy's the guy to make sure it's done, and we want to be sure that you know that we're going to support you.
Governor.
I see that knocking my nameplate over will not alleviate the fact that I'm actually here. Michael, one of the things that is, I'm very happy about the mentorship program that you've begun and the sort of apprenticeship that exists, because it might come as a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people here that there actually were I know at least minority firms, I can't, and women firms, I don't know if there were any disabled firms, that were conducting paratransit operations back in the 80s. And of course what happened in 1990 is that there was a case known as Croson versus Richmond, which we're all familiar with, which basically held by the United States Supreme Court that it couldn't be prima facie discrimination or prima facie past performance, that it had to be documented. And that, along with cases like Martin versus Rich and ATT versus Patterson, no relation, those cases created what was a chilling effect, so that pretty much for about a decade, all around the country, it was hard to create a lot of these programs because you weren't sure how the court was ruling. But certainly by 2000, other states began to address this, particularly states that would surprise you, states like Georgia and Alabama and South Carolina, who, when you add up their populations, have about the same population as New York, but had MWBE at that time compliance that was probably 3 times as great as New York. New York was 46 of the 50 states just 7 years ago in terms of that type of compliance. The female population in New York State was 51.8%. The procurement from New York State government to female contractors was 2.63%, even though the women companies were 29% of the companies that were pre-certified. And the numbers were even more woeful for Asians, Hispanics, and African Americans. So I do think that the non-availability of some of these firms isn't because they haven't gained the ability to do the job. It's because they were basically frozen out over a 10 to 15 year period when there were companies such as this. So assuming that the human consciousness hasn't suffered any detrimental cause than it had 25 or 30 years ago, we have to know that there are people waiting to run these companies that can perform these tasks for us. And in order to do that, we're going to have to exercise some creativity so that we do have a level playing field, because it isn't really just that there isn't a level playing field. It's that every time there's an attempt to make a level playing field, there is some cause that is preventing many New Yorkers, men and women from all over the state, from getting the opportunities they deserve. And when we went through the MWDB plan, we found that these problems were not caused as much by any anti-women spirit, any racism, or even a discrimination against the disabled or people's national origin. It mostly was because institutions tend to continue to cooperate with the companies they've already done business with and don't have enough of a window of an opportunity to give anyone else a chance. And to illustrate that, I would just like all of you to know that there were 2 men from Rochester who I believe to be white, who asked me how they could get into the MWDB program. And I thought, even with my diminished capacity, I can recognize that these are 2 white males. Why are they asking me this question? The reason was because the Empire State Development Corporation really didn't do business with a lot of white companies upstate. They were discriminating against them as much as they had the minorities because they continued to keep doing business with the same companies, which is why when we did the MWBE program in 2010, we had to have an accompanying small business program to cover the whites who wouldn't be eligible for MWDB. So the point is just that there are ways to address this problem, but we're going to have to exercise a little more creativity. And Chuck is right, that we can't say there weren't unavailable companies when we know that there's available talent.
I'm an agreement, Governor, and I want to just thank you for your leadership, which has resulted in the MTA currently awarding a record number of contracts to MWDB firms. Are we satisfied? No. Can we do better? Yes. Will we do better? Yes. And the operating agencies and the presidents, we're changing the way that we do business in order for us to do business in a more inclusive manner. Like for the mentor program, we are debundling projects, we're designing projects that's a great fit for our MWDBEs and small businesses to bid to us as prime contractors. We also hire Carver Federal Savings Bank in order to issue loans. We are also waiving or establish an internal bond program, so these firms who are bondless, they can bid to us and we'll wrap them up. So we are looking at our new 5-year capital plan in areas in which we can grow and develop a larger pool of MWDB firms who can finish our jobs safely, timely, and on budget.
Excellent.
I thank you. Just please take a look at the idea of saying that this is a factor in the procurement process. Maybe that'll stimulate some of them to do it.
Will do.
Any other questions regarding the 5 procurements? Okay, at this time, I would like to present a motion to take the committee into executive session to discuss matters regarding proposed, pending, or current litigation. Can I get a motion, please? Second? All in favor? We're going to executive session.
No, we're going to do it after.